Welcome, everyone, to the work session for July 20th, and welcome to everyone at home and everyone here. So we're going to be talking first about a grant that our metropolitan area received, a really great grant, and I asked for more details on it. It's the Housing and Urban Development Sustainable Communities Grant. Assistant City Manager.
Right. So that's exactly what I was going to say. We're here first tonight to discuss the Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant, and more specifically the Lane Livability Consortium. As you know, this grant was awarded to our region in 2010, but over the last few months, Lane Council of Governments has taken the lead on putting together a memorandum of understanding of how the consortium would work that has raised a number of questions about the grant that we're hoping we can kind of talk through tonight, and maybe there'll be more questions. We can get through those. So. Tonight with me is Stephanie Jennings from Community Development. She's our grants manager, and Lisa Gardner, planning director. And I'll start off and kind of set a broad framework, and then we're going to kind of tag team here a little bit. So,
All right.
Right on.
Get my head out of the middle of
Right. So first, I think it's important to look back over the work we've been doing over the last couple of years and focus on some of the associated staff efforts that's come with that. And the first I'd just like to point to is the Eugene Counts logo, which is up here in the corner. And as you know, we went through a pretty good effort with you several years ago to go back over your council goals and priorities to make sure the wording was right and to set some outcomes that you wanted to see us kind of move the dials on over the next couple of years. And I refer to those mostly because you reaffirmed a desire to have a safe community. You had they're up on the wall here: sustainable development, accessible and thriving culture, recreation, effective and accountable municipal government, fair, stable, and adequate financial resources. And these are just a couple of the plans that we've been working on since you've done that. The Community Climate and Energy Action Plan for Eugene, which speaks to a number of issues and a number of high-level outcomes you hope to achieve. Envision Eugene, which we're working on almost weekly with you around the 7 pillars and how we hope to grow over the next 20 years. And the Diversity and Equity Strategic Plan, which we, I think, brought to you last year. And all of these plans, while they're more specific, they kind of fall within that broad policy framework that you've set for us, and really hope to integrate nicely into some of the work we're doing as a region. This is, one of your top council goals for us was to kind of build our governmental partnerships and to strengthen our region. So this is just a couple of things we've been doing. The Regional Transportation Plan that was adopted by the MPO, our Regional Prosperity and Economic Development Plan that was done with the joint elected officials of Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County, and our Consolidated Plan that we've worked on with Springfield. All these partnerships are very vital. They're things that I think have been growing and enhancing over the last few years. So tonight, really, over the last couple of years, the other thing that's been an ongoing question is how do these things integrate? And I think and how do we leverage the resources from one thing to the other? Since I've been in this role, I know I've come at least once before talking about what is the work we're doing in planning and transportation and land use, and are we integrating those? There are questions that come up from the Sustainability Committee, from each of you have said, how do we do that? So really, when we saw this grant opportunity, what we looked at was, is there an opportunity here to better integrate the work we're already doing, the great work we're already doing, and work together as a region to kind of leverage the resources that are becoming more and more scarce. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to talk more specifically about the grant, and then we'll come back to kind of the big picture.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to talk a little bit about the overarching federal approach that this grant fits within. And so the federal agencies, Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Transportation, and Environmental Protection Agency formed what's called the Partnership for Sustainable Communities. And really this represents a fundamental shift away from single area investments to investments that benefit multiple areas. And part of this is recognition of the overlap between the work of these different federal agencies, and also recognizes the silos that have been created over time by the way that they're organized. And because at the local level, all of this has to come together. Our housing has to work with the transportation, has to work with the environment, it has to work with the benefits for people in our community. So part of the interest in participation is to increase our region's ability to compete for limited federal funds. The Partnership for Sustainable Community is organized around 6 principles: promoting transportation choices, affordable housing, economic competitiveness, support for existing communities, coordinating and leveraging federal policies and investments, and also valuing communities and neighborhoods. And if you look at these principles, there's actually a fair amount of alignment with our own city's principles and leading values, including sustainable development, accountable government, and the third one, which I'm forgetting, is fair, equitable resources, or sustainable resources over time. Within this umbrella of Partnership for Sustainable Communities, there are a number of different grant programs that are either existing or new that they're applying these livability principles to. And as you can see, we've actually had a mixed record in receiving funding through these different programs. As you look at each of these funding opportunities, they represent a step towards tangible projects. And all of them, except for the planning grant, is actually really focused on project level planning or implementation. I'm going to talk about one in a little bit more detail. Many of you may remember the application, the Tiger II Community Challenge Planning Grant application that the City of Eugene collaborated with Springfield, LTD, and ODOT. And the purpose of this grant was to attain funding to plan the multi-way boulevard and transportation changes that carry all the way from Eugene through Glenwood to Springfield, to downtown Springfield. And so this represents not just a City of Eugene priority, but it's also a Springfield priority, LTD priority. And this is the kind of opportunity that we really want to be able to take advantage of. The challenge is that there were 576 applications for this particular program, and only 42 were selected. And so there's incredible competition, and anything that we can do to create more of an edge and make our region more competitive to receive these funds is important. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to move forward with these projects as quickly as we want to. Specifically, the Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant supports regional efforts to create or enhance strategic plans and investment strategies to advance the 6 livability principles. Our region received what's called a Category 2 grant, and this recognizes that we have regional decision-making bodies and plans already in place for all of the major areas that are the focus of the grant program. And the funding is to help us fine-tune and develop investment strategies to advance our local goals. The Lane Livability Consortium goals can really be summed up in 2 ways: review existing plans, identify gaps and opportunities for linkages, and create tools and resources for advancing existing plans in a way that leverage multiple benefits. And this is hopefully the edge that will allow us to compete for those limited federal funds. There are many participating agencies and organizations. The overall level of funding for this is $1.45 million, and it's distributed across the participating agencies. Eugene will receive $52,000 of the grant, and we're providing an in-kind match of $43,500, which is specifically through staff time. And so it's staff time on the housing elements of the program that I would have been, for example, paid for with CDBG funds that I would have been using anyway. So it's not any additional resource on top of what we are already doing.
What was the Eugene amount, Stephanie? I'm sorry.
sorry?
What was the Eugene amount again? I'm sorry.
It's $43,500.
That's good.
Most of the local agencies are providing in-kind match. The only other cash match is provided by ODOT. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Gardner.
And Stephanie touched a little bit on the highly competitive nature of these funds, the sustainability programs that are funding some of the local initiatives around housing affordability, transportation, livability, and in general, this map shows you the number of applicants that they received for this particular program. It was over 1,000 applicants nationwide. The next slide will show you how many applicants actually were successful in receiving grant funding. And so there's just a smattering on the West Coast. We're one of them. Notably, Portland didn't get one. And I remember, I think, Mary, you were at Revolution as well. And last October, they announced the grants. Shelley Patisha was in town. And there was such a buzz at that conference around the fact that Eugene got one of these grants. Just a couple weeks ago, I was back in D.C. with Councilor Zelenka, Mark Schoening, and Mia Nelson participating in the Climate Leadership Academy. I'm not sure if Councilor Zelenka had a chance to talk to you about that, but it's a program that's funded and brings together teams from across the country to talk about exactly these issues. And the way the team that we put together was really focused on a lot of the work we're doing and have been framing within the Envision Eugene framework and also within our transportation system plan. So really trying to talk about and learn from others what's happening, what kind of federal funding opportunities are there, what kind of initiatives are happening around the country, and to partner with other land use officials, transportation officials. What we learned at that workshop of note was that, one, it's really a unique approach that these three agencies, HUD, EPA, and ODOT, are partnering together to come up with a funding mechanism to help further local plans and initiatives. And we also learned that of the 13 participating teams at the Climate Leadership Academy, 7 were grant recipients of this grant, and the other 6 were still sort of crying over not being recipients. And we had sessions that specifically addressed the integration of these programs. It was pretty exciting, and it was really interesting. Some of the other grantees that we talked to were St. Paul, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Seattle. There was a team from Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. So all over the country at different scales of governance. The MPO in Salt Lake City was one of the ones, but just a tremendous amount of excitement. And I think even in participating in that grant program, the workshop program rather, we were probably we were the smallest participating city. And I think people were really surprised and impressed that we had gotten one of these grants that some of the bigger, traditionally known the big boys, did not receive. So just framing it that way. And I guess just finally to tie it in again with Envision Eugene, the pillars that we've been working within, the framing by the Community Resource Group, the focus on things like economic prosperity, redevelopment, brownfields, trying to maximize our existing land use patterns, to make the connections between housing affordability and equity and transportation. And so it was really, really helpful and good timing for me to be able to participate in that program. So I think I'm going to turn it back to you after with that, Sarah. Okay.
So really, I just wanted to talk a little bit about next steps. Where we are right now is we've been working through the details of the memorandum of understanding. And when I say we, I'm talking about all of the partners. So these are, multiple daily conversations with partners at Lane County and Springfield mostly, some with the University of Oregon, trying to make sure that the work plan and the wording and the understandings all work for everybody so that this is a true, good regional partnership. We were informed today that we've received an additional extension on the deadline to have the memorandum turned in, so I don't think there's an absolute date out in July or August, but I know we're working on that. So there's not a pending July 1 application. We did want to leave it on the council agenda so you'd have an opportunity to talk about it and ask us questions. And we'll continue to work on that. So with that, I'll just open it up to any kinds of questions, comments. Andrea Reiner is also here from Lane Council of Governments. She can help with any specifics around the agreement.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And I guess the comment that I might make to that is this seems like an opportunity to take things that we've already been really working hard at and move it to the implementation stage, which is what everybody wants to have happen. We hear constantly about not wanting to make plans and have them sitting on shelves, but really wanting to bring them to reality, and this can help us move in that direction. And given that this is what we're is on my mind this week because we're a year out, but I think I would call people back to the huge sort of consortium of interest that went to getting us the Olympic track and field trials, which was considered to be quite a coup, and it was because people came together from all across the metro area from all different places and really work together to bring that home for our community and to make it a big success. So this seems really in line with Envision Eugene as well. And I think we got this grant because of the work that we've been doing, because of the groundwork that went before it. We're always building on the good work of the people who came before us, and so this is just part of the same kind of thing where we're working on things that we have been coming for a long time and are built on the hard work of not only people of Eugene but the people in our whole larger metropolitan community. Mike, I see that you were in the queue, and Pat.
Thank you, Mayor. Taking off on what the Mayor said, I agree that there has been an emphasis as of late to look at ways where we can work better with our regional partners, and I think it's critical at this time when our economy is in the state that it's in, when the challenges are bigger than ever, for us to do a better job of working together with our regional partners. Leads me to a couple of questions that give me some concern with this. One would be, we've already built a number of regional problem-solving mechanisms, organizations that are new in order to address some of these very issues. We just formed an act in order to do a better job of forming regional transportation priorities. I mean, there are a number of things that are already in place, and so I'm unclear as to how adding this makes that better. It seems more to me like this is an opportunity for us to do research work to apply for other grants that lead to more things that don't produce as tangible a benefit as I might hope for personally. So aside from some of the things that we have as a community as goals, and the county or Springfield or somebody else may have as goals, I'd be more interested in further information at a later time or now about what are the concrete products that participation in this will give us. And I don't mean specifically it'll give us greater ability to collaborate. I mean, what are we going to do? It's going to be easier for us to get a fix at Delta and Beltline. You know, what are the concrete projects that this will help solve? And number two, again, to the regional problem solving and regional solutions model, which I absolutely agree with. What do we do if Lane County and Springfield never find a way to be able to participate in this? They just can't accept the conditions of the MOU. How will we address that?
I think we'll just work through that one step at a time. I mean, it really is to be a regional plan. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that
I heard that Springfield just or the county, one of the two, just asked for yet another extension. Is that true?
we asked Lane Council of Governments asked for an extension so we could continue to work on the MOU and be sure that everybody's. Do we have a date on that, Andrea, or we just need to give them a date?
We need to give them a good idea of when we can be complete and when we can have these agreements, and they understand that the Springfield timeline was middle of July, so we're confident we can get it up until that date, and if the county needs a little more time to follow that.
Right.
We haven't done the formal date request, but we have been given that extension.
I appreciate that. Some of the other concerns I have around this are the idea that I don't understand very clearly the relationship on some issues of governance, how this interacts with other regional decision-making organizations and structures that are already in place, and how they interact, supersede, don't supersede. And then lastly, I asked for some input on Eugene's budgetary implications for participation, and had the manager say it was predominantly in-kind staff time that apparently we have extra of to be able to add to that. I mean, that's our part of the match.
It would be inaccurate to say we had extra of that. What we did was we identified things that we're already budgeted to do, that we already do, that would be eligible to be used as a match. So it's not new work, it's not new time, it's work that Stephanie is currently doing.
That will fit into that.
Or that I'm doing
we-
at
or-
Eugene,
right,
that we
that
get
we
credit
can-
for.
That we can count as a match. So
Already,
we're, this is part of trying to leverage what we're already doing to gain more, so.
I know that there are some concerns with other bodies about their budgets, for example, the county being so slammed as they are, and the amount that they may have to dedicate to this staff-wise or financially for that matter.
Right.
Thank you.
Pat, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Stephanie, you mentioned CDBG money. This is money that would have been spent anyway, correct? So it's just, as you say, leveraging
Right.
money that would already be spent, bringing some other money in. I have a question regarding that. The total rent is at 1.45, is that right? And Eugene's share of that is
52,000.
52,000. About, what, 4.5% of the 1.45? So, and there are 11 partners in this? So is Eugene seems kind of a unusually small number if it's between 3 and 4%. What's the reason for Eugene having a smaller amount than other partners?
Right. So I would say the majority funded person out of this grant is Lane Council of Governments, and they are also doing the bulk of the work in terms of coordinating all the different resources. So if you look around the rest of the regions, and I don't have the breakdown of what each group is actually getting right in front of me, but we're pretty much in line with Springfield and Lane County and others. It's somewhere in the same ballpark, with the largest portion going to LCOG.
LCOG. And LCOG's work is, by nature, allocated among the different jurisdictions that it serves. Okay.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, that's all. Thank you, Mayor.
George Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that was kind of my question. My first question is, when will the money be dispersed?
Andrea, do we have a microphone we can ask her? When we get into the specifics, she's the grant manager, so that's why
I could also we're able to enter into an IGA, and so it's on a reimbursement basis. So as staff time is expended, we request reimbursement.
Send the bill to DC, and
We send it to
who's
LCOG.
actually dispersing the funds? I mean, there's this tri-agency group. Is it?
It's HUD.
They have their own, like they formed a tri-agency group, and they're overseeing all this money.
HUD is the administrator
HUD's the
of this
administrator.
particular
Okay.
grant.
And so all the money goes to LCOG, and then they disperse to the participants?
Correct. We are LCOG's subrecipient for the purposes of this grant.
All right. And the MOU, I've read through that, and each participant is to provide budgeted staff. Are these funds that they were already using for regional planning efforts, or do they have to come up with new money for, or do you know? I mean, you may not know the answer to that, but...
I don't know about LCOG's match, and so we would have to ask
Okay.
Andrea that question.
The
Right.
question is LCOG using existing regional planning dollars?
Yeah, well, I was just looking at the MOU, the draft MOU, and it said each participant has to provide staff with their own dime, I guess, was the way I read that. Or will they get some of these funds to pay their staff to participate?
The allocation of the staff time is in line with what the agreement says around what the partners will be reimbursed. So, for example, the City of Eugene would be reimbursed for $52,000 worth of staff time, and they pledged the $43,500 in terms of in-kind existing work. And each of the agencies has a component that's either, some they're receiving or that match.
Okay.
LCOG has provided some local match, but as we're we don't have our own funding base, primarily that work is our other programs. So, for example, our work in transportation is more funded by the regional transportation dollars.
Okay, thank you. Then I was looking through the draft work plan, and on page 47 of the AIS, there's one I don't know, it just struck me as an odd thing to put in a work plan. Task 7.5, defining our region. The purpose, to understand the complexity of varying definitions of our region and how they provide opportunities or prevent barriers toward meeting important goals. For the life of me, I don't know what that means.
Oh, you don't want to catch up?
I mean, if we,
No, she has, we have talked about that extensively, but I think it's...
Well, if the federal funding programs are going to look at regional programs, they define that differently almost every time. So
I see.
Stephanie's work in affordable housing has one set of boundaries. Our Metropolitan Planning Organization for Transportation is another. We have regional boundaries for our Metro Plan, for our transit district, so that even in responding to some of these programs and in working collaboratively, we're challenged just by kind of who's at the table and when. And so it's just an opportunity for us to look at that issue and see if there are some things we want to do, if it's maybe just a almost like an inventory and cataloging, or if there's some efficiencies that we might look at.
okay. And is that also something, I suppose, you would need to provide some discrete empirical data to HUD too? Say this is the region that we're talking about. Is that kind of what that means?
I think
I
that
mean,
our primary
of it.
client really here will be the agencies within the consortium. It's really what is useful to that group to be able to work together and to be successful for the grant. And in doing that, we will meet HUD's requirements. So.
Okay, thank you.
So you know what this reminds me of is when you think of how we put affordable housing projects together and how you have to bring so many partners together who each bring something to the occasion. It's only by squeezing all of that together that you're able to bring those projects home, and they're very complex and very difficult and take a lot of work to have happen. I wanted to point out on page 1 of the draft, I guess it is, memorandum of understanding. It says at the bottom here, paragraph here, that consortium members will ensure that any regional discussions occur within the current governance framework and within adopted policies and procedures of the respective jurisdictions or agencies. So it is being set up to respect and utilize the existing framework that we have here. And then on page 5, it says a consortium is an advisory body and is intended to provide assistance to partner agencies as and when requested as an adjunct and an available resource for ongoing mandated projects. So it's to help, to advise, bring all those heads together, I guess, to try to build a better project and get a better result and leverage what we've got. Is that fair to say? Second round here, I've got Mike and then Pat.
Thank you, Mayor. How would you respond to those I've heard say this is similar to 2050? How's this, so I guess my question is, how is this fundamentally different than 2050?
Take that? Oh, yeah, sure. Excuse me. So without going into, my memory's not going to be able to march us through everything that we did in 2050, but that was a regional planning framework where from the very beginning we were trying to get together to determine what the regional priorities were. And I think what's fundamentally different about this is it's assuming we've already done that. Mm-hmm. And all the plans that Sarah sort of walked you through that exist, that we've done locally, that we've done as a region, whether it's the Economic Prosperity Plan, the Consolidated Plan, this program is meant to leverage those existing opportunities that we've identified that we need to do to take the next level. So whether your earlier question about how does this get us funding or what does this do for us later, Delta Ponds or things like that, I think it's meant to just move the ball a little bit farther down the field on the existing priorities that we have. It's not meant to establish new ones. It's not meant to put in a new level of governance, although there's a grant oversight piece to that has to happen at the same time. And I guess one other thing to point out that I'm not sure I mentioned earlier that I meant to is around the funding prototype coming out of federal agencies right now is no longer single objective grant funding. So you want to do transportation, I'll give you a transportation grant. Or you want to do affordable housing, I'll give you a housing grants. They're really multi-objective funding. So we've seen that in the Tiger Grant. We're seeing that in the Sustainable Communities Grant. And then last week I heard from Lynn Richards, who's the policy director at Sustainable Communities for EPA. They're about to announce an EPA round of grants where I think there's going to be $50 million of funding available. This one I think was $100 million. And so if we recognize and change with the dynamic funding structure that's coming out of Washington and keep ourselves in that pipeline, and we continue to be seen as an innovative city that implements things, that gets things done and moves that ball forward, I think we will be in much better light for those future funding opportunities that ultimately will look like large capital funding projects. So to me, that's a fundamental difference from the 2050 to this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pat?
Helpful.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, well done, and well done to LCOG and Andrea. You guys seem to have brought all of this together, and you're the lead applicant, right? I have a couple of questions regarding some math. We're getting about 52,000 City of Eugene, so there are 11 partners, and if we're equal roughly to the 9 of the other 11, that amounts to about 500 or so thousand, which leaves LCOG getting something short of $1 million out of the grant to do their work, which is spread out evenly among the other 10 members. Making sure I've got this correct as I have it written down here. Now, 52,000 isn't a lot of money in the scheme of things. I mean, the people who are writing me letters are saying $300,000 for not closing a fire station, which we're not doing, of course, but clearly 52,000 gets eaten pretty quickly in the grand scheme of things. So I trust staff. You guys have always done fantastic work, and just can I rest assured that you're convinced that we're going to be able to spend it pretty efficiently, pretty effectively, the CDBG money that we're leveraging into it? We're not in some form of imbalance with the other partners in this?
I can't speak to the specific funding piece, but I think one thing I would offer around how the funding breaks out between what LCOG is receiving directly and what we're receiving in support of that is it's a program we're trying to advance. And so LCOG will be doing the analysis of the work of our commonly identified objectives. So it's not that they're getting something to do something different. It's that they're the recipient to do the bulk of the work, and the other grantees are getting pieces of that, so the subrecipients in support of that work.
Hearing you say that gives me a great deal of comfort. Pardon me, Stephanie, I'd like to hear you too.
I just wanted to recognize that this is over time, and so so it's in part integrated with the administration of federal grants that I already do. For example, one of the goals of our HUD grants are to integrate affordable housing issues into our regulatory framework. This fits so very neatly with that, and but at the same time, we're still implementing projects, which is why it's good that LCOG is doing the majority of this work, because we want to keep staff time focused on the project implementation, but still see the possibilities and need to look for those possibilities to get the potential additional funding that's out there. There are many, many regions that are taking advantage of this opportunity or other opportunities, and while I think we've been a leader, we have to continue to work hard to maintain our leadership position, and this grant does provide us with an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Your responses give me a level of comfort that is out of proportion with the amount of everybody's time that I've taken up asking the questions, so thank you.
The only thing I would add to that is I do know that our Senate offices are watching this because they have talked to me about it, because they see this as a way that smaller, in our case being a smaller community, will be able to get resources. And so they're looking at this as a vehicle for getting resources to smaller communities that wouldn't be, or smaller metropolitan areas that wouldn't be available otherwise. So and they're looking for us to be successful at doing this, to be a model for other places. So that's really the deal here. So just any other questions or comments by anyone? Okay. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to field any others as they come along.
Right.
So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Okay, I'm going to head into our process session. Yes.
I noticed that we've changed around the order here, and I just wondered, do you think we'll have time to get to all of it today?
I think we're going to get probably, we think we'll get as far as the boards, commissions, and committees part.
Thanks, Mary.
You ready to move on this one? Okay, let's go.
If the order works, we'll move and
Okay.
through it as much as possible.
And I purposely want to let you know that sometimes when we have these process sessions, I don't use the timer, but I'm using the timer so we can move along and get the work done.
We anticipate that Councilor Pryor will be joining us shortly.
Okay. So proposed changes to operating agreements comes up first? All right.
And so I think, or I hope it's pretty self-explanatory as laid out in the agenda item summary. We can go those one by one if that's helpful for you. And depending, if these are acceptable or with revisions, then we can return with a resolution so that you can revise the.
Okay.
So these are really just to make changes that would, essentially reflect your practices. So starting with the public forum, the current practice has been to allow 3 minutes and until all have been heard rather than limiting the amount of time given in a night.
I do have a
Yeah,
I
George.
do have a question on that, and I understand
Betty.
that people are used to the public forum, and it is useful at times. My concern is when we have action items on our agenda, and we have 50 people signed up to speak at the public forum. I appreciate people coming down to testify. I understand what they have to say is important to them. It's important for us to hear it. I think our action items should take priority. And if we have an exorbitant amount of people signed up to testify at a public forum, maybe take the first half hour, 45 minutes for the public forum, attend to the business of the action items, some of which are time sensitive, and then return back to the public forum and let everybody have their chance to speak. Because I think there's times when we get rushed at the end of the evening to get through some of these action items without people getting an opportunity to speak and be heard and think straight. Because after a certain amount of time, people's brains tend to not function as well. So if there's some way that we can work that into that part, to allow everybody to have their turn at the public forum.
After exactly what hour does our brains turn to mush?
Betty, you're next.
I think we should continue the way it has been recently. I thought it was really bad when we used to say half an hour's up and the rest of you can't speak, because people who come to speak put a lot of time and effort into it, especially making sure that they can finish in 3 minutes. That's not easy if you're not an accomplished speaker. And I think it's really good. I think this is one of the best things, one of the best things that Mayor Piercy has done is change the practice to listening to everyone who bothers to come down. And I think it's good that we're letting them have 3 minutes and not, as we sometimes in the past have said, oh, you can only have 1 minute because we have a lot of people, and that is not easy to change on the spot. So I think it's important to listen to people, and if they want to come and speak to us and be heard on TV, that's something that we should do. I think when there are a great number of people, they get tired and leave, and so it takes care of itself if we have too many people. They after a while you see people, you call the name and people have gone home because they couldn't wait. Maybe they'll have to come back another time, but that is not our shutting them off. It's their deciding that they don't have more time. So I think the way we're doing it is fine.
Alan?
I also think it's important to listen to people, maybe our job number one. I sort of like the way we do things now. I'm not sure I like exactly what this says. I agree in part with Betty and agree in part with George in that I think we should listen to them, and and people do take a lot of time and effort to come and people practice to come and talk to us, and it's important what they have to say, and we've solicited their input, and to cut them off arbitrarily, I think, is inappropriate, and then to stick them at the end, which might be hours later, is really a tough task to ask people to stay away from their families that length of time and spend their whole evening with us. So I'm kind of halfway in between. If there is a time-sensitive matter that we have to get done that night, and we've got a long list of people, then I'm willing to take that particular time-sensitive piece, deal with it, and then come back to the forum. But I don't think we should take all of our agenda items that aren't time-sensitive and stick them in between just because we have an arbitrary cutoff time. So if we could modify this to reflect by council majority vote that a time-sensitive thing could be interjected in the middle of the forum if it looks like it's going to run, then I would be supportive of this change.
Andrea?
Well, I was going to kind of suggest the same thing, but I was thinking, some of the meetings I attend, there's an agenda review at the front part of the meeting to say, and that might be your opportunity to, if there is something that's time sensitive, that we do that first, get that business out of the way, and then go on with the public forum. I do like the way the public forum is. The first time that I went to a public meeting, Councilor Bettman, I walked with her over to the council chambers, and she said, "This is the best show in town." and I thought, really, but it is. I mean, no other place do people get an opportunity to talk to us in a public setting where they can just pretty much speak about whatever they want within a content, mind you. But I appreciate people coming to public comment. I wouldn't want to dissuade them.
George Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm kind of halfway also. I like the idea of maybe one important item that is time sensitive that has to be absolutely cannot be put off, to just do that first, because there'd probably be a little bit of debate about it. But anyway, and I understand what Councilor Poling is saying. There have been a couple of occasions when they've gone on very late, and we had a couple important things to discuss, and frankly, I was tired and wasn't, my mind wasn't as sharp as it probably should have been to, discuss the matter, and I think I voted okay, but I don't think I was as articulate as I would have liked to have been, discussing that item. But in general, I like it the way that it works now. Seems like nights like that, what, 2 or 3 a year, maybe? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's too outrageous, and it is really important for everybody that wants to be able to, share their thoughts with us. So I'm kind of for keeping it the same, except maybe make an exception for something that really needs to be decided, so that we can, while we're still sharp, go ahead and have a quick discussion and vote on it. Thank you.
Betty?
We're not always sensitive to the time of other people, that's a problem I see. And I think that the public who came in to speak to us, they're getting their time early is more important than our going to bed early. I think that most of you have never, except Pat, you haven't been here when we had the meetings that went on till midnight. But
Monday, June 2nd, yeah.
Well, anyway, we could always take a break and come back and finish. We used to take breaks sometimes if a meeting was very long. We could take a 10-minute break, and we would not be keeping the people who want to speak to us there for that time, and then we could be refreshed and come back and finish if it's time sensitive, then we can finish it before we go home.
Pat?
Thank you. Councilor Taylor, I don't think you were there sometimes when I was there and the sun came up during public forums. I enjoy public forums also. I like hearing from people, almost to the point where I feel like it's a little bit of self-indulgence, allowing a lot of it to go on, because I really do enjoy it. People have a lot of good things to say, sometimes things I've never heard of, sometimes over and over again, things I've heard of many, many times. The issue that I have is sort of a balance of fairness. We're talking about being fair to the people who are prepared to take 3 minutes to talk to us. Sometimes they prepare it ahead of time. Sometimes I see people in the back of the room filling out, saying, "Oh, I need to talk about that too," and so they're adding their name to the list as the meeting goes along. But the balance of fairness to me is to the people who are making presentations to us that are on the agenda. And how many times have we seen people who are there to give us a presentation leave without giving us a presentation? So the fairness is then to the people who have come down actually to make a presentation. It's on the agenda to make the presentation. They don't get to give it. So some form of limitation. When I first joined the council back in 1995, we had public forums once a month. And I think I was the one, in fact, I'm sure I was the one that made the motion to make it every Monday meeting that we had the public forums. So people used to save it up. I think it was the first council meeting of the month was a public forum meeting. So we've done that step where people can make comments at each meeting. But I believe that in all fairness to the people who are there to make presentations on agenda items, we need to be very sensitive to that. And by placing people at the end of the list after agenda items have been performed, I don't think that's particularly unfair when you take it in balance with the fairness to the people who are here to make their presentation regarding agenda items. So I enjoy it. I love it. I don't want to lose it because it really is seeing Eugene at its finest. But
So in all fairness,
balance.
I want to say that people cannot sign up to speak after the time designated for them to do that. So they can't just decide later that they want to do it. They have to sign up by...
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes into the meeting.
After the gavel starts.
That's a rule, yeah. It's our rule.
It's in your agreement.
Okay, well, you might want to review that.
Well, it's worked pretty well.
Other things are happening that people don't want to be in our council chambers for, then I think we should be flexible.
Well, at any rate, right now, we do have a time limit when people can sign up to speak in the evening, and they know they have to by that time, and we've been doing it for a long, long time. And as I recall, when I was first mayor, and we were working on changing this, people came to those forums just aggravated and often upset because they felt they were going to be compressed into a time, and there was a chance they wouldn't be able to speak, and they just sort of arrived feeling out of sorts. And that hasn't happened for a long, long time because we moved the hearings to another date and because we tried to be open to giving people ample time to speak, and it's worked in keeping the temper in the room and the demeanor in the room really, really good. And so my best, and we rarely have anybody doing any presentation to us at a council meeting. We may have an action item, but we don't have presentations. So my best advice is to the and after listening to you, and this is certainly your decision here, is that it sounds to me like you want to give ample time, but if there's some things that might be some important decision coming up that might be crunched, you'd like to think about moving that up to the front some. That's what I'm hearing. Is that okay?
Not just presentation time, Mayor, but a lot of staff members are there to respond to questions that may come up. So, and a lot of people from the community are there to see the actual agenda item and not listen to the public forum.
All right. So, shall we go on to the next item?
Also on that section, there's a bit about shuffling the request to speak, and that hasn't been the practice, and we just wanted to check in with you to see if that works. We're not currently shuffling all those requests to speak to numbering them.
Mostly we don't get pros and cons. Mostly we get just people wanting to talk about things.
So is that
mostly, that's still public hearings, isn't it?
Yes.
There's an order that they go in?
correct?
Okay.
That's all right.
All right.
So you just do it,
As
the
they
order
come
they
in.
come in?
Yeah.
Correct. So if that's acceptable, we can continue with that.
Okay.
And if people hand in a group of four, their group of four gets to go together.
Correct.
Okay, ready to go to the next one?
Right. And then under executive sessions, the sections have been changed to acknowledge that the council is responsible for evaluating the performance of 3 employees.
Did we skip public hearings?
Pretty straightforward. So you had here, the next one was a section had been changed
Oh, I'm sorry.
to reflect the council's practice of conducting public hearings on the third Monday, and that one's okay with everybody? And then the next one is the section has been changed to acknowledge the council is responsible for evaluating the performances of the three employees, which you were just talking about. And then on to the next one. Committee reports, you add the language about the change on that. Anybody got anything about those committee reports? My only observation is once we get them going, they get shorter and shorter because people have had a chance to at least get the initial conversation that's going on in their committee. Okay. Updating on advisory bodies to the council. Everybody okay with that? Other meeting guidelines. The paragraph dealing with the comment times has been revised to reflect the current practice of maintaining a 3-minute per speaker limit for each round of council comments. You want to explain that one?
Well, it's only we've just revised it to show that you're doing the 3 minutes, although there have been times, for instance, in listening circles, when you will ask the council to modify that and be a little more conversational. And so we want to make sure that your operating agreements reflect the practice that you're using.
Oh, it didn't say that before?
So
No, I think I could do it, we could go down to 2.
When I first came on the council, I think that's what it was. I think you had
3, 2, 1.
2,
3, 2,
3-minute
1 or
rounds,
something.
And then it would go to a 2-minute round.
lightning
There's also,
Yeah, I was just going to ask that.
people kept saying the same thing over and over again, so it was,
But those people aren't here.
Yeah.
Well, I do that sometimes.
Oh, I was going to say
Alan?
what George said. No. In Budget Committee, we used that super round where you can get an extra minute or 2 minutes. Sometimes that,
Lightning round.
yeah, that could be, someone just has one more minute to say instead of going all the way to the end of the queue and their point almost becomes irrelevant sometimes. I wonder if that's not a practice we want to, you got like one a meeting or something like that? Is that what we do in Budget Committee?
Yeah, but we only meet for a month at Budget Committee.
Yeah.
This seems to be working pretty well.
I'm actually,
Mulligans. I'm
in
a
agreement.
do-over on my comments.
So, Q, Alan, are you through?
Yeah.
Anybody else want to make a comment on this one? George Brown.
Well, I initially kind of thought that you should get a little extra time because sometimes your thought, your presentation gets broken up, but having done this for a couple of years now, I think it works pretty well most of the time. And very rarely have I been dissatisfied about like, oh my gosh. Because I can squeeze it in the next round usually.
You want to say something, Mike?
I do. I agree with Alan. I think that 1 extra minute per meeting per counselor at some particular point. And I'd be absolutely in agreement with that. I think it works well at Budget Committee, and I think that we're all, mostly grown-up types that, we can use it sparingly and is only when we need to make a very important point.
Andrew doesn't want to hear.
Yep.
I gave her a straight line.
Pat's
in
got
that.
his hand up.
Thank
And
you.
then George.
I'm fine with the super round. And the reason I say that is I hope you guys, it doesn't go unnoticed to you all how polite's not the right word, how respectful this council is compared to some council that I've witnessed in the past. You guys are all very respectful of each other's time and each other's comments, and it's just not the way it has been in the past. So I don't think we even need cues. I think we just talk among ourselves.
We're working there. We're getting there.
Maybe a step at a time.
George.
okay?
Well, I'm not inclined to change it. I think the 3 minutes per round is good, but if there were a majority of us that wanted to do the super round, I wouldn't want to limit it to 1 per meeting. I think it'd be 1 per topic or agenda item. Because you're going to burn up that 1 minute, which one of these agenda items do I want to waste or wait and use that on? So, but again, I'm not advocating for that. I'd rather leave it just 3 minutes per round.
Could be like chess.
So I'm hearing maybe 3 with interest in more time in a super round, and maybe nobody else thinking that's a particularly good idea.
No.
So, yes,
Well, the only reason you might want a super round is if that would be in place of another whole 3 minutes, is what I'm thinking. You want extra time to complete a thought, which is what George is saying. So if you said, give me 1 more minute to just complete this thought, and then I won't need a second round, yeah, that makes sense. That's economic.
That's not going to always happen.
You don't know that for sure. Someone may say something that brings up another point that you want to make, and you can't
So
argue that discussion.
And why do we need an extra minute? Just take another round and take your 3 minutes.
So I think it sounds like we're ready to stay with the 3 minutes. And okay.
I want to hear
All
what
right.
Andrea says.
I'm done, Mayor.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the next item.
Almost got her to say it.
Took a minute away.
Kelly?
I think we've got that section done.
Yep.
Next is checking in on communication with constituent contacts and the public service officer, and I wanted to invite Jan Bowman to the table just to do a quick check-in with you, because I think it may have been the last couple of times we talked with you. We got some feedback. We want to make sure we're on track.
Okay.
That is primarily it. When this process session was first scheduled, Karina Fawn, who is the current PSO, was planning to attend, and then got rescheduled, and she's out of town today. So I hope you've all had a chance to meet her. If not, we can corral her and bring her down to a Wednesday work session. But she's been working in the position several months now, and I wanted to just check back and see how the reports, we've been kind of tweaking them a little bit as we go. You asked for an outcome field, and that's been provided, and a little bit of summary abundance. There are staff comments. You can always, of course, ask for more information, but we don't want to have those reports be too lengthy. So I just wanted to check in and see if that was going okay for you.
Andrea?
I think it's, for me personally, it gives me enough, the reports are just meaty enough to where I kind of get the idea of what, excuse me, of what the concern is of the constituents and then the response. And I really like the automatic email response that people are getting so that it doesn't go off into Netherlands. So and I really like the calendar. I think the packets are very good.
Yeah.
Other comments? So thank you. I think everybody seems really, tell her it's going well.
Great.
So thank you. All right. So this is another one that we think will be relatively short. We'll see. IGR?
We think so. And in the packet, I think it's page 73, number 11, talks a little bit about IGR committee motions and recommendations. And so what this question is that right now when an IGR committee member makes a motion to change a staff recommendation and doesn't receive a second, the motion then dies for lack of a second, and in effect, the staff recommendation stands. And so this is an opportunity for you to discuss whether that's the way you want it to work. And it's at that place with the IGR committee.
And the only thing I would add to that is that this was an effort to try to move legislative items along rapidly enough to be helpful to Brenda and her work. But I'd say that for you to consider, the downside of it is that you, whether you agree or disagree, you're essentially having 2 of your 3 IGR members make a decision about whether something comes to, it's still coming to council, it's just not coming with a divided vote, and they will act on it up until it comes to council, right? George, that's correct, right?
When you say they will not act on it.
Staff will.
Staff will act on it until it comes to, unless council pulls it at a session, right? Right. So you have a period of time where, because the one IGR member who wanted to change it couldn't get a second, that the staff will continue to act on the staff position unless it gets pulled by council, and sometimes that's a period of time where that action continues, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that? You're the chair.
No, the way I remember, that's the way that it's always been, and it gives Brenda the opportunity to at least continue on with her work until such time it is pulled at a meeting. I just think that we should go ahead and keep it that way, because that way at least Brenda knows she can at least start her basic groundwork on these, and usually by the time it really gets going, we're kind of up to speed on all of them, and there's not that much of a delay in the time we go to IGR and the time we go to council meeting with the reports.
Go to Betty.
Well, it wouldn't be fatal if we didn't act on something, if we don't have to have a position on everything, and if one member of the committee thinks it's a bad idea, I think we should wait until the council acts on it, which may be 3 weeks before there's a council meeting after the IGR at certain times of the year, certain times of the month. And another thing we could do, we could say out of courtesy that somebody would always second a motion, but that hasn't happened lately. But I think it's better to have no position for a while than to have one in which one member of the committee is not happy.
I'm going to go to Mike because he's on IGR, and then I'll come to Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. This was an interesting question that was brought up this year when we first started the work. And for those that haven't sat on IGR, the first several meetings are the ones where there's many, many more bills to review, and the legislative session is just starting. There's a lot more potential out there, and it's my experience that I might disagree philosophically with the position that staff has taken, but I've never seen them take a position that was too far off of where I think the majority of council would probably go. So when the staff's position comes out, it's oftentimes one that would likely make it through full council's vote. And so Brenda having the capacity to move forward, especially at the beginning when some of the opportunity to have real impact exists, is significant. We started out this year with the idea that if one person made a motion and it did not receive a second, that bill would be pulled and brought to full council before it could be reviewed on. The challenge was the list of bills that got one person making a motion and no second was huge. And we'd have been here, an hour at night debating all of those issues. And there's the issue that it could have been pushed off several weeks before there's any action, and specifically at the beginning where Brenda really needs to get in some work. And so we changed the rule back to the way it previously existed in the next IGR meeting, which is that if you don't get a second, it stays with staff until the full council can pull the bill and talk about it. And I think that's a wiser way to go, because then no one particular counselor can stall a bill or a position on a bill without the full council weighing in on it. Because all it would take if we changed this is one counselor says, no, I don't like it, I'm going to make a motion, and then that's off the table for what could be 3 weeks. And that could be fatal, in terms of our capacity to weigh in on it.
Alan?
So this wouldn't change if the non-unanimous votes coming to council for resolution. This is just, so I have not been on IGR.
This won't come, though, as a non-unanimous vote. That's the issue.
Right. But so in the case where someone objects and they want it to be a non-unanimous vote to bring it before the council, they
can't do it.
They can't do it unless, they can't ask for a vote on a particular bill.
No, but
They can if they don't get a second. It's not brought up by the committee.
So then it doesn't get flagged.
So it doesn't get flagged to get a vote.
Yeah.
Then it would be up to that individual counselor on the IGR at the next regular meeting to pull that one off the discussion.
At the IGR meeting?
No, any
at the council
counselor
meeting.
can pull any of the bills
pull it
at
at
a
council
regular
meeting.
council meeting for discussion.
So we don't do that as a matter of course.
The converse is that one counselor can yank almost everything off and nothing goes forward for Brenda.
And that's basically what was happening the first couple of weeks of this year.
Or what if it was neither one, George? We're going out of our queue, I'm sorry. But so what if it stayed, but it got flagged?
Sure.
That's fine.
Flagged as a non-unanimous.
Yes, it's just, but in the meantime, the staff keeps working.
Right, because the thing that I'm struggling with is so then the majority thwarts the minority viewpoint in that particular case, and it never gets to the full council, even though it's non-unanimous, it just didn't get to the level of a vote.
Unless that person wants to bring it back up again.
It can, but I don't recall any, if hardly any, where people have actually done that.
No.
So that one, that's not our practice, so that doesn't really help. So
Does happen.
I kind of like the mayor's solution, which is if someone wants to bring it up and ask for a motion, that it gets flagged as a non-unanimous one, and then it gets brought before the council.
But staff continues to
Work on.
It's still the staff recommendation until the council takes a different action. That's true on everything, right? Unless the staff
It's just
recommendations.
rising it to the level of everyone's attention. The person still has the capacity to bring it up, whether it does or not. It just automatically rises to the level of everyone's attention. And I could live with that.
Okay. Because it seems to me you could do something as simple as put a little flag by it on the list, and that would just take
Do
care
an
of
outlook.
it. Yep. Yep. Okay.
I think that's your next item.
I know.
Actually.
I thought that was the lead-in.
Segue.
Oh. Jeez.
Sorry, I was reading and I just got that.
All right. So,
Well, Counselor Clark had asked that we place this question before you in a process session, and we've provided a little bit of information. We did just a very small survey of some of our colleagues in other jurisdictions to see what they are doing with the Pledge of Allegiance, and you can read this here. And we've also had some public discussion in the news about this topic as well. And so you're aware that some do this regularly and other bodies do not.
I didn't see the list. I'm sorry, I didn't have it.
in there.
Oh,
In the electronic version, I didn't see that. Where was it on there?
we're just providing here in the agenda item summary
Last couple of sentences.
that the Salem City
Just the
Council
last
conducts the Pledge of Allegiance at every one of its meetings. Springfield City Council does so at its regular meetings, but not at work sessions. And then when we checked with the Lane County Board of Commissioners, they do not routinely conduct the pledge. And the Portland City Commission does not either. So that's what we learned. We just checked in with a few.
Well, I can say, and I may need a soup round here, or second round. I brought this up at the last process session we had, which I believe was last October, last year, because for me, and I happen to know there are a couple of other local ones, for me this is an issue of unity and an opportunity for us to talk about being on the same team. It's kind of changed a little for me in the intervening months, but I'll start there. Up on the board behind that particular curtain, our very first goal talks about how there's strength in our common humanity. And that's a piece of language that we changed intentionally, and I changed when I was on Human Rights Commission, talking about the strength of the things we have in common. I've seen it said or written in the paper about this being some manner of test of patriotism, and I reject that entirely. That's not why I brought this up. I don't know if you noticed, but the mayor and I disagree on issues occasionally. But I know for a fact certain that she loves our country every bit as much as I do, if not more. I know that for a fact. I'd argue with anyone. But that's an issue of opportunity for us to celebrate something that unites us, which I think is a good thing for this body to do. It's an opportunity for us to reflect on the fact when we start, and we may have disagreements on various subjects, that we're working towards the greater outcome, we're working towards a better, larger good, and that we're all on the same team. And since then, another kind of thought process has occurred to me. And it's this: my kids in grade school, and just like every other kid in school across the Eugene district, says the Pledge of Allegiance every Monday morning at school. I'm a proud past president of the Active 2030 Club, and we say the Pledge of Allegiance at every weekly meeting, and so does the Rotary Club, and so does the Springfield City Council, and the Cottage Grove City Council, and several other cities around here. And all of those are kind of traditional celebrations that all of those bodies do. Now, I may run out of time. I'm going to beg your indulgence a little bit here. There are a lot of folks in our community, and many at the table, who celebrate and value the idea of celebrating the strange or the weird, for lack of a better term. We talk about it's a value for us to, for example, the Eugene celebration. We enjoy the idea that we can celebrate the odd and strange, and that's cool. That's a value that a lot of people in our community have, and I would not want to deprive them of that. I think that in a free country, that's cool. That's what they like to do. But there are a lot of people who value the opportunity to celebrate the traditional. And what I'm asking is for the tolerance to understand that that's important to a lot of people in our community as well. And for me, this is an issue of our willingness to accept and to celebrate both of those values and to be inclusive rather than just one and rejecting the other. I would say that for those that, and I totally understand and have read, those that may take offense at this particular part or that particular part, to them I would answer that there are many things we celebrate in our community that offend many other parts of our community, but we're a tolerant community and we're proud of that. And this is an opportunity, I think, for us to extend some tolerance to a celebration of the traditional that many people would appreciate, and I'm only suggesting it for the 2 Monday night council meetings in the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to make my comments, and then Chris is in the queue, and Andrea, and Betty, and Alan, and George Brown.
Did you miss me, Mayor?
Okay. So I wrote them down because I just wanted to be sure of what was coming out of my mouth. I say the Pledge of Allegiance at numerous meetings and events. I go to, as many of us do, I go to Memorial Day and Veterans Day commemorations and speak about honoring those who sacrifice on behalf of this country. That just seems just to me. And like each of you, I've taken my oath of office committing to serving our city and honoring our federal and state constitution and upholding our laws. And I think that's about democracy. I believe strongly in justice and the rights of each of us to pursue our beliefs within the confines of law. I respect the breadth of opinions and the way people lead their lives, and I think, as Mike does, that's about freedom. When the issue first came up about putting in place a requisite Pledge of Allegiance at every council meeting, I was inclined to just say whatever council wants to do. But our last council meeting crystallized for me why that response was not adequate and not in keeping with my belief system nor what I feel is my duty. I remembered the Board of County Commissioners meeting when an angry crowd took over the meeting and forced the Pledge of Allegiance. And that shortly thereafter, we heard about the council was going to be asked to discuss having a pledge at every council meeting. Then last Monday, one constituent stood up in our council chambers and demanded that every patriotic person stand up and take the pledge. And the implication was clear that not saying it was supposed to mean one did not honor our country or our troops. And this begins to feel a lot about what has been happening across our country. I'm not here today to question anyone's intent. I think there's good intention. I'm just talking about my feeling and what I believe to be my responsibility. We don't have a history of saying the pledge on our city council, but we have all given our oath of office, and in doing so, our allegiance to this nation and state and city. Our council and our community have a diversity of opinions on the issue of the required pledge. There is no consensus around this. It is not something that brings us together any more than we have already had with our common promise to serve our community the best we are able. I, however, would be fine with ceremonial pledges for those days when we lift up the conversations regarding patriotism, such as the 4th of July, Flag Day, Memorial Day, if that's desired. I'm not so sanguine over required pledges for every city council meeting, which has the implication that to not participate would denote a lack of patriotism or honoring our armed services. I believe the flag is a symbol that is to be treated with respect, not something to create division and criticism, nor to lay the groundwork for other such demands. So that's just my feelings on the subject. And now I'm going to call on Chris.
Thank you. As probably everyone else has, I've given this a lot of thought, and I had the ability to serve on a couple of boards that did do the Pledge of Allegiance. I was on the school board for 11 years, and they did the Pledge of Allegiance before regular meetings. They didn't do it before work sessions. I was served at Willamette Lane for 20 years, and they did it before their regular meetings. If you look at the Pledge of Allegiance, I don't have a problem with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I don't think really at its core that's what the issue is. A lot of what I've read, a lot of what I've wondered about, a lot of what I've reacted to has been the sense of being compelled to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Is the Pledge of Allegiance to be something that's mandatory? I think that's what concerns people, because I believe the First Amendment protects our freedom of speech, and it also protects our freedom to not have to speak if we choose not to. And so I think it is not even part of this discussion to say that a Pledge of Allegiance would be a mandatory part of the agenda, and I don't think that's what Mike is even proposing. With that in mind, if before regular council meetings, if we just simply add it to the agenda, to me, that's all this is about. Do we add it to the agenda? People have, by their First Amendment right, the ability to say it or not say it, to say under God or not say under God. And there's been times in my life when I have said it, and there's been times when I haven't said it, and I feel like the same person, and I'm just as patriotic either way. I don't want this to become divisive, and I know it's easy to become divisive, but my sense is a lot of the energy around this issue is the notion that you're going to make me say the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't want to have to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would defend the right for them not to have to say the Pledge of Allegiance with every breath. At the same time, I don't see anything inherently wrong with the Pledge of Allegiance if it is entirely voluntary, and this gets to the point that we had at our last meeting. When someone stands up and implies that to say or not say the Pledge of Allegiance is an indication of their patriotism, their loyalty, their color, whatever, that is wrong. And that's just plain wrong. And I would defend a person's right to not say the Pledge of Allegiance as vocally and as strongly as I would defend the right to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So to me, if you want to add the pledge to the agenda, fine, I don't care. That's fine. And those that want to say it can say it, and those that don't want to say it don't have to say it. But for me, this is not about a mandatory pledge. I don't want to go there, and I don't think that's even what we're talking about. But before a regular meeting, if you add it to the agenda, and those that want to participate can, and those that don't, with no loss, and I agree, with no loss of dignity, respect, or deference, do not have to say the pledge. That's where I would come down. As long as it is entirely voluntary, respectfully voluntary, then I'm fine with adding it on. I wouldn't defend a breath of mandatoriness.
Andrea?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to be leaving after this section, so I can get my inhaler because I'm having trouble breathing, in case you're wondering why I'm running off. So this is really an interesting conversation. Originally, and pretty much, I don't have a knee-jerk reaction to the negative of this. What my challenge is, and I agree 100% with what the mayor said. I'm glad she wrote it out because I couldn't really find the words to articulate a lot of what she said, and I really think that she did a very good job. But my challenge is that so many of the community members that I represent in my community, not me personally, but I know a lot of people, a lot of homeless veterans, a lot of people who feel like this, that they do not identify with the Pledge of Allegiance. They've served their country. They feel that the world or this country has not provided for them even after they have given their lives or their limbs or their mental health or what are their families to them. And so my challenge is, how do we keep our council chamber inclusive for people who don't feel aligned with the government like I do? I personally don't have a problem saying it. I have a problem with somebody telling me I have to do it, but I wouldn't have a problem with it. I do have a problem with the reality that we would probably discourage some folks from coming down and participating. You know, when I think of people who are really not mainstream and feel like this government has let them down, and I'm not talking about the city of Eugene, I'm talking about the federal government as a whole. I'm really challenged to, to want it to have it to be in our council meetings. I'm not saying that those folks come anyway, but I'm just trying to think of the majority of the community that I represent.
Betty?
Thank you. First, I want to say that it is not a choice if you have it as a part of the agenda. I can't imagine any of us saying, oh, I'm not going to do that. It wouldn't be a choice anymore. I have watched students in high school who had a choice, but they were ridiculed by other people if they didn't do it, when we used to have to do it in school. As a child, I went to school in Kentucky, and we said the Pledge of Allegiance first thing every day. We said, under God wasn't in it yet at that time, so we said, one nation indivisible with liberty and justice for all. We were all in that room, we would all be white, Protestant, and looked pretty much alike. On the other, then we'd go out on the other side of town. There was a place that was called Blank Town. It's a word we can't even say anymore. And we never thought about, it was just a rote thing. We never thought about liberty and justice. We just said it. And that when you say something, automatically that's the way it becomes. So you just say it. Then we would sing, then we would say the Lord's Prayer. Then we would sing songs like Old Black Joe. There were no black people around us. They were over there. There were no brown people. There were no Catholics. There were no Jews. And I don't think it brought us together. Maybe it just was something you did. If we did it now, rather than bringing us together, I think it would bring us apart. And I also think, as the mayor said so well, we all have pledged to uphold the Constitution. We pledged to do the best for the city. We don't all agree on what's best, but we're all here because we do want to do the best for our city. And we are practicing democracy and working for liberty and justice. And as we see it, all the time we're working as counselors. We don't need to get up and pledge that we're going to do the right thing every meeting. And I think we show our patriotism by what we're doing, by participating in government. Thank you.
Alan?
I agree with a lot of what the mayor said and mostly what everybody else has said to a large degree. After reading the comments and reading the letters to the editor, I don't think this has necessarily been a unifying topic. I've said the Pledge of Allegiance hundreds of times. I love my country, and I know and have many friends that are vets. And many of you know I served in the Air Force at the Air Force Academy. Part of that life and part of that training was training called SERI, Survival, Escape, Resistance, and Invasion Training. Part of that was a mock POW camp, and where we did it for 3 days, and with very little food and water and sleep, and and we learned about what it was like to be in a POW camp. And after being worn out and stressed and tired over those 3 days and hungry, at the end of it, we lined up at dawn in a line, and they said to us to do an about face. And when we did an about face, there was the American flag in the dawn's light, literally. And it was a very powerful moment for me, and it was very special and very impactful for me. I learned a lot that day, and I also learned that when things become a matter of course and they or routine, they lose their meaning and they lose their specialness. And I don't want that to happen with the Pledge of Allegiance nor the flag. I think maybe there's a happy medium here where we acknowledge both those that want to celebrate their patriotism every meeting and those that feel this is a political litmus test and are compelled to say it. I agree with Betty that if it's part of the regular agenda and you don't participate, that's not voluntary. That's not really a choice. That doesn't really necessarily work for me. I prefer doing it at particular meetings where on days that make it special. Things like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Flag Day, and the 4th of July. Those 4 days in particular, I think, where we could make it a celebration, where we could invite veterans of foreign wars or the Boy Scouts or somebody else to come and talk about and participate with us and make it a real special event. And instead of doing it as a matter of course or rote. I've also seen recent examples where people have used this as a political tool, and I think that's very inappropriate, and it felt uncomfortable to me. And I don't want to see that used here. I'm not saying that it's the intent here at all, but I don't want to see that this become part of it. So I think some kind of happy medium where we do it and make it a special event on particular days is a really good idea.
George Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I think this whole discussion is a solution in search of a problem. I don't see the relevance really for what we're trying to do here at the council meetings, which is work on the city business, and to interject this patriotic ritual at the start of the meetings is is, I want to say almost counterproductive, and it certainly will not do what, I mean, it's obvious from the discussion that it has not united us. It's, in fact, the Pledge of Allegiance has been very divisive throughout America's history, ever since it was initiated. Jehovah's Witnesses were persecuted terribly for not saluting the flag because of religious objections of transferring allegiance to an inanimate object instead of God. There's all kinds of religious reasons to not say the pledge. There are atheists, there are agnostics, there are Jehovah's Witnesses, there are many other people that object to the word under God. That was added in 1954, the height of the Cold War, to differentiate ourselves in some super patriots' minds from the Soviet Union, which, godless communism, which in fact there are quite a few Christians and Muslims in the old Soviet Union. It wasn't a, godless country at all. I really don't see this as uniting us. I think it's already divided us. I've got emails and heard from people that are very uncomfortable with the idea. I mean, these are people that regularly attend the city council meetings. We're proving our love of community and country by participating in the participatory democracy, as are all the people that show up for the meetings, either to listen or to give testimony or to comment during public hearings. Some of them have told me they feel uncomfortable because they don't really want to do the pledge. They can't because of religious conviction or otherwise. And yet they think, well, I'll be made to feel weird if I don't do this. So I don't think we should do it at all. I think we should be like the Portland City Council and not say the pledge at all. If people want to reaffirm their patriotism and their love of country, do that before the meeting. Do it in a private ceremony at your house or with your friends or something like that. I just don't think it has much of a place in what we're trying to do here. I don't see how that's going to unify us. In fact, I see it as dividing us even more.
Pat?
Thank you. A lot of things I'm not unique on, but I kind of have a unique perspective on this. On September 7th, 1965, I stepped into an American classroom for the first time. I was nervous that the Beatles had just been on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I had a pretty similar accent, so my nerves went away very quickly. Then, without warning, I was asked, along with the other kids in Mrs. Imhoff's sixth grade class in Tillamook, to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't know the words, but Debbie Johnson, who was standing next to me, did, and she was proud to help me out. The next day I could recite the pledge without help. And like Debbie Johnson, I'm proud to do so every chance I get. Later on October 25th, 1979, after I took an extended course of study and I passed a knowledge test, I became a citizen of the United States. I had to take a test. I freely recited the following: I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Goes on, that I'll perform non-combatant service, that I'll bear arms, etc. And it ends in that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help me God. A few years later, I joined the Army, and I pledged a similar oath. When I became a U.S. Army officer, I pledged a similar oath, all of which ended in "So help me God." So then I became a member of the House of Representatives, and every day in the State House, every day prior to our business, we recited the Pledge of Allegiance. Not everybody did. It was on the agenda, but it wasn't required. Some people sat and didn't say it. Some people stood and raised their hand and said it. People in the gallery said it if they wanted to. They weren't required to. And I believe that it's not a rote discussion of a rote recital of something just that you've memorized. Every time I say it, personally, as a naturalized citizen of the United States, it means a great deal to me. Every single word in it means a lot to me, and every time I say it, it goes to my heart. And once again, perhaps I'm unique in that because I wasn't born under this flag. I was born under a different flag. I'm proud to be under this flag. I'm proud to be a part of the United States. I'm proud to be somebody who freely can say a Pledge of Allegiance to my flag whenever I want to, and not say it if I don't want to. It's a great country, and we should all be proud of it. The flag represents to me the country of the United States. It represents what I came to this country for, what I took a test to do, and I'm proud to be a U.S. citizen. Will I ask the Eugene City Council and Gallery to join me in pledging allegiance? You bet I will.
George Bowling.
Well, I kind of like Alan's suggestion of making it part of a special holiday or the day following a holiday or preceding that special event. When I first came on council, we did say the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of the State of the City address. That would be another good time to do it. I remember I grew up as a small kid in Oklahoma. I remember citing the Pledge of Allegiance every morning and followed by a prayer. Moved to Southern California when I was in middle school. We still did the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, and got into high school. We did the Star Spangled Banner before football games, followed by a prayer. So, to me, saying the Pledge of Allegiance is not something I do by rote. It's something that means quite a bit to me. I've served in the Marine Corps. I've served for different police agencies. I've served on the city council now. I've buried a lot of my friends under that flag, and it does mean an awful lot to me. And I wish I had it. I've got it somewhere on my computer. There's a little something that somebody wrote anonymously. When they fold a flag at a funeral, there's 13 folds in that flag, and each fold has a separate meaning. And when a friend of mine passed away, worked for the sheriff's office, I was asked to see if I could modify that to fit law enforcement, and I wrote that, and I did. And the flag means a great deal to me, and I'm not ashamed to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance anywhere, anytime. But like other people have said, I don't think it needs to be mandatory. When I was in middle school, I had one of my classmates that I don't know if it was religious-based or what, but she would not say the Pledge of Allegiance. And, middle school kids can be really vicious, but no one ever bothered her. I don't know if it was just the friends that surrounded her or what, but we had no problems, with that. So, if we want to make this optional, we want to do it for special events, that's fine with me, but, sometimes in my own mind before the meeting starts, I go ahead and say it anyway.
Mike and then George.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree with a lot of what's said here. I certainly agree with Chris's initial statement that this is not a mandatory thing. It's no way did I bring this up as it should be intended in any manner as a test. It's a little deeper than that for me, and I agree it should be entirely voluntary. And when I first read an email with the mayor's suggestion that maybe we do this on special occasions like Alan brought up, I think that was something that it made me sigh to read it at first, but I understand the reasoning to do that, and it sounds like a happy medium that I could accept, a start, if you will, to do so at State of the City and maybe the first council meeting after any of those 4 particular holidays, because obviously we're not meeting on those holidays. So the council meeting after that, I think I would be willing to, the closest one to it, exactly, so that we could at least do this at some level. And to my friend George, I would say, I certainly understand your point, but you first mentioned that it's a solution in search of a problem, and that's kind of what I was trying to speak to earlier, is that there is a problem for a lot of members of our community that they don't feel like they feel like their desire to value the celebrating of the traditional is met with hostility. And I have a challenge with that, and I want us to be more inclusive than that, and that's why, I mean, we don't have a Veterans Day parade, we don't have some of the more traditional things that help people who value that feel included. And so this is an opportunity for us to take a small step to reach out to some members of our community who may feel some sense of hostility towards something that they value. And so that's kind of why I would like to see us do this, and I guess maybe those 4 times during the course of a year could be a good start.
Well, it seems, I don't know how you want to handle.
Can I make a motion? Is that how I do it?
You,
Would that be necessary?
Well, that's an interesting comment. This initially was presented as this is a process session about our meetings, how to make our meetings run better, remove barriers to make our meetings run. The idea was originally presented as something that would unify us somehow in some mystic fashion. I'm not sure how it would unify us. Well, now we hear that it's really not for that. It's to make members of the community who are aggrieved somehow, make them feel better. I just don't see the relation between that and our process session. I keep hearing different justifications, and it just kind of goes back to my original point is the Pledge of Allegiance is not a unifying element in American culture. It's been very divisive throughout its whole history. And it just increased during the 50s. There have been multiple legal challenges within the last 10 years. Circuit courts have said, yes, it's totally unconstitutional. It violates the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment.
we have time, we're going to let Alan
I'll make the motion.
I was going to suggest that maybe I work with Mike and craft something that we could bring back to council.
Well, I was just going to make the motion.
Doing it right off the cuff here.
Well, I think we've got enough of this, and we probably don't need to beat it to death, I wouldn't think, just to say that I'd move that we do this at the closest council meeting to the 3 holidays mentioned and at the State of the City.
Well, I said 4 holidays, and I didn't mention.
I apologize. Then I would suggest change my motion to that, to the 4 holidays you mentioned and the.
I don't see any problem with,
city.
unless you do, Mike, I don't see any problem with you guys talking about it and bringing it back to the next
I'll second the
meeting.
motion.
Thank you, sir.
All right,
So we have a motion and a second?
Alan.
So the reason I wanted to think about it a little bit more is to incorporate some of the other comments that I've heard today about how do we do it, when do we do it, who gets involved in it, what part of the agenda is it. I think that merits a little bit more thought. So I would move to table till we have a conversation and bring this back to council in the next couple of meetings.
Point of order, maybe table isn't what you really want to do, because if you table it, then this motion is still the active one. Maybe what we should do, and I always hate voting against my colleague here, but what we might do is go ahead and take care of this particular motion, and then if this motion should fail, then we could pursue a more deliberate process.
If I could.
Yes, Mike.
What I'll do in the interest of making this easier is this. I'll withdraw my motion from the table, meet with Alan and talk about it, and then I'll make the motion at a later meeting, once we've
That would be very good.
come up
Mike.
with the details.
That'd
How's
be-
that?
That'd be a
Sounds
very
great.
good thing to do.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that very much, because I would rather us come back with something that shows what we can agree on than to have to go through what we
As
just.
would I.
What if I don't withdraw my second?
Yeah.
Well, then we have another problem, haven't we?
I'll withdraw.
Thank you for that generosity. I think it will be, it'll make us all look and
I just don't understand
So thank you
why
very
Americans
much.
have a problem with this.
and we'll get there. All right.
We've created a new
So,
unified process.
yes.
We have 2 guests from Risk Services to talk about emergency procedures,
Oh,
which
good.
they thought would take about 5 minutes, if you want to do that tonight.
We can do it tonight.
Okay.
We have time.
So let's ask Joe Rizzi and Craig Sorseth up to the table from Risk Services.
You guys should take a test.
We recently reviewed some procedures as staff, and we thought it'd be helpful for you as well, because you spend time in this building.
Thank you.
Good evening, Counselor. Mayor and Council. My name is Joe Rizzi. I'm the Emergency Manager for City of Eugene. And I'm joined by Craig Sorseth, who is the Safety and Loss Control Environmental Program Manager. Just want to talk to you briefly about some emergency procedures. This kind of came about, we did the Great Shakeout exercise back in January 26th, which was a drop, cover, and hold exercise. And after that, the CMO's office came to me and said, could you come talk to our office and about some procedures around City Hall and what we would do in case of a fire or an earthquake. And so I did that, and they thought it was very informative. They asked me to speak to you, and we also did a drill after that, and we did an evacuation drill, and Craig held that evacuation drill. I don't believe there are some counselors here, but not all of you. And so what we wanted to address is kind of what you do, either in an earthquake or a fire or an emergency. So I'm going to go over it briefly and then kind of open up the questions. I let Craig kind of answer those questions. And then if you have any additional questions about emergency preparedness or anything like that, we can touch on that.
Is Sarah going to demonstrate?
So if I just get up and walk out, don't worry.
We can ask for volunteers.
So essentially, buildings should be evacuated for an alarm or after an earthquake. First of all, obviously, if the ground started to shake or the building started to shake, we would drop, cover, and hold. If you want to talk a little bit about that, we can explain why that is. After the ground would stop shaking, that's when we would actually evacuate. And we'd be looking to identify some people, either counselor or a member of the staff, that would do a sweep. In other words, would look through the actual area and say, we're evacuating, please evacuate the area, and just do a quick look through to make sure everyone's out. Once you do the evacuation, you'd head to the south parking lot, which is the parking lot right behind me as I'm seated now. And that one person that you designate as a sweeper would report to the east side of that parking lot to EPD and say, I've swept McNutt room or I've swept the council chambers, and it was all clear. And that's going to give us indication so we don't have to send people back into the City Hall after an earthquake or a fire or something like that, so we know that everyone's been through the area. So essentially, that's the procedure. It's pretty simple. The one thing that we would want to do is talk a little bit about who's going to be that sweep person. Because you never really know who's all going to be here, I would say you can yell it out when it happens. As I'm sweeping, please exit, and you'll go through the area. And that would work just fine. Otherwise, we can identify staff that's at most of your meetings, but I just want to keep that in the back of your head.
The only challenge here is that you might have 5 people say, I'm sweeping, I'm sweeping, I'm sweeping.
We have one volunteer non-sweeper. I would be with you. So I kind of want to open it up, and if you had any questions about that, or
Explain what drop, cover, and...
Sure.
Yep.
So drop, cover, and hold essentially is during an earthquake, you want to get down on the ground, you want to get underneath something stable, such as these table, and then you want to hold on to after the shaking. It's best to cover your head and your neck. Really, the reason we do this is because we're not really... We're really concerned about falling objects, whether it's light fixtures, ceiling tiles, projectors. If you look around you, the things that could fall, glass breaking. So it's important to cover up because these are the things that are going to hurt you and what's mostly what happens in larger earthquakes. After it stops shaking, you can exit the building. If you try to leave the building while the ground is shaking, obviously you're going to have real concerns. You have a hard time walking. You can fall. It's an old... It used to be stand in the doorway. That really doesn't work because if everyone stood in the doorway, there's only one doorway, and there's how many, biggest guy gets in there, I guess. I don't know how that works. So it's really important. And not only do we stand behind that, but the Geology Society and Red Cross and all the people pretty much in the area, that's kind of the best way of doing it. So are there any questions, concerns, or emergency preparedness or evacuations? And that would happen also if you had a fire drill, the same kind of thing you do that sweep and head out, go out to the south parking lot.
You wouldn't drop.
What's that?
You wouldn't drop.
No, exactly. We're not
Unless you're on fire.
Any other questions? Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yes, you were so good that there's no...
Yeah. And also I wanted to let you know, did I present to you guys before the Map Your Neighborhood program, the 9-step program? If not, I'll leave it here. You can grab, there's a DVD and a 9-step program. That's the one that's kind of going out to the neighborhoods, and it's really doing well. It's a 90-minute video. You can take it back and take a look at it. If you have questions, you can contact me. We'll also leave, and I think I emailed you the Living on Shaky Ground, which gives you all the information for Oregon about earthquakes. I think we already sent that out, correct? Okay. So I will leave the other one here, and then...
The only thing that I just wanted to say is, and I've said this to staff, is that I get pretty constant asks about what we would do in the case of an earthquake or a flood that might go with an earthquake kind of thing. And so people do have that on their front of their minds all the time. I get a lot of inquiries about it. And
Right.
so yesterday I got another one, and I didn't find, I know the emergency plan's in there, but it wasn't. It could be easier to find, is what I was on the website.
Yeah, we have a lot of good information to share, and trying to jockeying for who has that page is sometimes difficult, but I agree with you, and that's why some of these programs are putting into place, like Map Your Neighborhood. It's really outreach and CERTs and other programs like that.
How about on the website where it says, where do I find?
Mm-hmm.
Could it be on the on that list?
Yeah, it's actually, if you go that far scrolling list right there,
It's on there?
it's on there. You just scroll. It's on the first. You have to scroll down about 3, and it's right there.
What's it
called?
Just emergency management.
Okay, so that'll
Good
be...
plan.
Thank you very much. Yes.
May I ask indulgence for a lightning round briefly?
Yes, you can.
Super round, maybe.
We didn't approve
Just for clarification, the reason you hold, what you hold on to is the table that you're under, because it will bounce away from you.
Okay.
That's one reason the hold part is in there. That whatever you're hanging under, you don't want it to get away and leave you vulnerable. Also, we checked with Oregon Emergency Management with this vulnerability of this building. If you're downstairs in the parking area, you don't drop cover and holds, you get out immediately.
You're dead.
We've instructed the police to do the same. If they're down there, exit the building. Don't worry about dropping cover and hold. And also, EPD is the command for the entire city hall. So even during business hours or in the night, if you're meeting, the watch commander and everything, they will still, in an earthquake, they will assemble at the east side of that parking lot, and your sweeper reports to them.
That's where incident command will be.
That's where incident command is going to be, because they've got the communications capability.
It's not going to be in this building.
No, they're going to be outside. Same with fire, but that's what I needed to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
In case of an earthquake, we will fall.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a copy of your...
You know, it's got...